I have a second channel, Cube Computer Plexi. Hey everybody. So it's been roughly 2 years now since I have reintroduced the Cube Computer Plexi back into service. And I must say it's been definitely nice having this machine here in the tech room. Been using it as a service computer. As you can see all these cables out front. I can use this machine to back up hard drives, clone hard drives, image them and stuff like that on the fly. Because I have this thing set up to where these SATA cables are hot swapped. You can just plug in a hard drive like an external device and plug in power to it, and it will detect it, and you can go about what you're needing to do. So this system, those may know, there for a little while I built a system in that E-machine tower down there, that Next Gen Deluxe tower I customized. It has a nice window on the other side where you can look inside the thing, but the problem I had with that machine was lack of access to the internal components. Of course, if I need to go inside to disconnect a cable or change out a component or whatever, I always had to go in and take the panel off the side and dig around to get what I need to get access to. Well, with the Plexi, everything on the motherboard is just right there. Everything is easy to access. Now, if I need to change out a hard drive, yeah, it might be a bit difficult, or the power supply, because this thing is practically held together by hot glue. This is how they built these things back in high school. When I was in high school at Hopewell, we built these things. Essentially, we had two different sizes of acrylic plexiglass, or acrylic, or whichever you want to call it. This is actually acrylic, but we had two different sizes. We had the big rectangles and the small rectangles. This piece here actually was something I made in middle school. I just tacked it on there just to give it an extra cool look. But these systems, we built these things out of hot glue. Those two different sizes of acrylic as well as hot glue to hold everything together. And I remember the other students in the class, they assembled these things in various ways. Some people put the motherboard down inside here, others put it on top. I mean, the original Plexi that I brought home was configured very similar to this, except the optical drives were facing out toward the left, kind of like the back of the power supply. But with the redesign, I put the optical drive on its side, which you can do that, and integrated it right into here, and also included the card reader at some point later on, as well as the USB ports and the audio jacks and all that good stuff. And essentially what I did is I took the older style Plexi that I built and refined it, made some improvements to its design, such as this motherboard tray. The original Plexi, the motherboard was really just, I had some standoffs that were just glued into the top of this thing. Matter of fact, what we did in class, if I remember right, we took motherboard standoffs and just drilled holes in the acrylic and mounted the standoffs wherever they needed to go. Which, this is not the original, the top piece is not original to this thing. I did have an extra spare top piece that I grabbed when I was still in high school. So the current version, as you see, has this motherboard tray that came out of an HP Pavilion system from like 2000 or 2001, and it houses your standard like micro ATX motherboard. So it makes changing out the motherboard a lot easier, and also it helps to reinforce the add-in cards, which on the previous Plexi, they were just glued in and not really supported all that well. So, you guys may be wondering, what do I have planned for this thing? Well, you know, I don't use this thing much more than for doing basic tasks, like looking up stuff on the internet and imaging drives, and it works perfectly fine for that. It has gigabit LAN on its motherboard, so if I need to transfer files between this machine and Mid-Tower Lux, it does perfectly fine at that. One big complaint I do have about this thing, though, is it does not have USB 3, and not only that, the USB 2 controller on this board is just flat out awful. It's very slow. I do have a IDE slash SATA to USB adapter that can do USB 3 connections, but also USB 2. And normally USB 2 would be tolerable. It wouldn't be very fast, but on this thing, it's just flat out awful. And the motherboard that this thing runs, the model is back there somewhere. I'm not going to look for it, but it's a socket AM2 Plus board. Oh, there's the model right down there. It's upside down. But it's a socket AM2 Plus board. I got this board out of a part system back years ago. This motherboard, I don't think had many hours on it when I got it. It was in a cheap. It was inside of a cheap case with a cheap power supply. Had an AMD Phenom quad core CPU on it, 125 watt CPU, on a motherboard that was designed to only accept up to 95 watt TDP chips. So first thing I did is I pulled that chip off and I replaced it with a different chip. It's currently running a socket AM3 Athlon 2 CPU, which, you know, many of you know, the socket AM3 processors, they not only house a DDR3 memory controller, but also house a DDR2 memory controller. That way they would be backwards compatible with motherboards, with AM2 boards that had a supported BIOS. So, one thing I would like to do with this thing is perhaps swapping a socket AM3 board. Now, the TV box system in the living room has an AM3 board with at least, I think, 6 SATA ports on it, which I think the board does have RAID. It would need to have RAID support for the, I believe, for the hot swapping. I don't think that board offers overclocking, which I'm kind of disappointed about, because every once in a while I do like to do experiments with this thing. I did. Some of you may remember earlier this year I posted a video of experimenting with older AMD Sempron chips with this thing. The first time I really ever even bothered overclocking with this board. But this board, as mentioned, the USB support, the USB controller is not that great. The BIOS on it is not that great either. There are some things that just flat out annoy me about the BIOS. But yeah, I mean, this thing's been chugging along for 2 years. I mean, it doesn't run now like the Mid-Tower, unlike the Mid-Tower Lux. This thing doesn't run all the time. It only runs when I need it. Most of the time, it actually sits turned off. And there have been some times where this thing failed to start. This motherboard and the CPU, depending on which chip I have installed, it's always been picky with RAM. There'll be times where I have to, you know, switch power off to the thing, reseat the RAM modules. Matter of fact, about a few weeks ago, I thought the motherboard decided to call it quits because I tried reseating and replacing modules and nothing happened, but eventually it decided to start working. So, I'm probably going to end up swapping out this board for an AM3 board sometime down the line. Not 100% certain on that just yet. Who knows, I might swap something else into it. I mean, this thing, that's one thing I like about this system is how easy stuff is accessible on top. You know, the motherboard and stuff like that. The drives, as mentioned, a bit more of a chore, but I mean, it is what it is. But everything up here, easy to access for sure. And one thing's for certain about this thing is I do not plan to put a solid state drive in anytime soon, because the Western Digital Enterprise 1TB drive that's in it right now offers pretty decent performance for a mechanical drive. Plus, I absolutely love the noise it makes. That's the one thing about the Plexi is, since everything's open, you can hear everything. You can hear all the fans on the motherboard, the power supply, you can hear the drives running, you can hear the drives accessing. And I'll never forget when I built this thing back in 2006, the drive I had in this thing was a Maxter 20 gigabyte IDE drive, and it was quite noisy. It was quite chattery. You could definitely hear it, and This particular drive here kind of reminds me of that drive that used to be in this thing back in the day. And I tell you, just for nostalgia factors, I love it. I must say. But yeah, on the back of the system, it's been a while since I've shown the back of it. I dedicated this thing to Michael Healy, the computer teacher who was in charge of that class. He taught computer engineering as well as computer programming. And unfortunately, on this day, I think it was December 30th, on this day, 11 years ago, he was tragically killed in a car wreck. And I tell you, that was tough. That was really tough. And that was one of the big reasons why I wanted to bring this system back to service. It was in memory of him. And it's something I kind of wonder sometimes. You know, somebody commented on my videos recently asking if anybody has ever built any systems named after my systems. Not to my knowledge, but yeah, I sometimes wonder if people have ever tried to build systems like this. The thing I do wonder sometimes is, you know, we had a pretty good class size back in the 2005-2006 school year where we built these things, and I kind of wonder if there's any more of these systems out in the wild running. Now, of course, I'm sure they're probably not running their original stuff, because when we built these things back then, we built them using retired hardware. Out of most of the stuff that we used was out of retired compact Despro EN systems, which we're talking Pentium 3s, Pentium 3 CPU based systems with PC 133 SD RAM, Windows 98 on the hard drives. I mean, it was just crazy. But I do happen to wonder sometimes if any of the people in the class are still running any of these systems. Now, of course, they probably don't call theirs Cube Computer Plexis, but the Cube Computer branding actually came from Michael Healy. I remember back in the fall of 2005 when he announced to the class that we would be constructing Cube computers in the spring, and he referred to them as Cube computers. And now they're not shaped like a cube, but I mean, I guess if you look at them a certain way, you could, I guess, think of a cube. But that's what he called them, and that's why I've always called this thing the Cube Computer Plexi, and of course that's where I got the name Cube Computer Company from. But anyways, I figured, you know, it's been roughly 2 years since I brought this thing back to life with different hardware and a revised design. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well, everybody, that's it for this video, but don't forget there's a lot more interesting stuff on the channel to check out. Also, if this is your first time visiting this channel, feel free to subscribe to Cube Computer channel, and also don't forget to tick the bell so that way you'll get notified of new video posts. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, but if you really didn't like it, there is the alternative option available as well. Also, feel free to check out my second channel, Cube Comp MTDX. There you'll find videos about bicycling, weather, elevator tours, and all sorts of other neat, interesting stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to come back, and thank you for your support.